The platinum rule is treat others how they want to be treated, right? And once I understood the platinum rule, my life got a lot easier. I was just like, oh my gosh. I own an agency called My Amazon Guy, and it's a $20 million ARR agency. We have over 550 employees. We work with 400 brands, and I manage about a $1.2 billion in annual revenue on Amazon. When I first started out my career, I was a TV reporter. I loved doing videos and content. But one coming of age moment, I was in the middle of a blizzard.
We can barely see you out there.
It is miserably cold out here, that is for sure.
In the state of Wisconsin in the Midwest of the United States. And I was just miserable. And it was at that very moment I decided, I'm going to do something different with my life. I want to be home in my pajamas at 10 p.m. at night. And it took me a couple of years in transition, but I went back to school. I picked up an MBA, and I actively worked to try and figure out like how to do something different. And I fell into e-commerce. And along the way, I ran into this thing called Amazon. I spent about 10 years in the corporate track building out Amazon companies and Amazon brands. And every single one of these companies usually had like a very major deficit, just like something that they couldn't control. The last company I worked at before I started my own business was a lighting company. Amazon had some, interesting changes happening, and a competitor came on the scene and just kind of changed the model for them. So I took them from like $100,000, $200,000 a month in revenue all the way to 1.2 million. So almost 10x them. They called me into the office one day and be like, hey, we're terminating employment. I'm like, what for? And they're like, well, we're going to go a different direction. And I'm like, after I 9x you guys, you're going to go a different direction? Like, what direction could be better than what I'm currently doing? And they're like, yeah, we understand it. That's why we're going to give you a 3-month severance. In the United States, severance is quite rare. And to get 3 months is benevolent of them. I'd go into the forest, I'd look up at the sun, I'd look at the birds and the bees, and I'd be like, did I peak? Like, I was making 200,000 USD at age 30. And I was wondering, had I peaked in life? Like, who is going to hire a 30-year-old at $200,000? And for 48 hours, I was miserable. Finally dawned on me. I wake up, I think it was a Saturday morning, and I said to myself, you know what? I'll freaking hire myself. I go on LinkedIn, I make a post, and I say, hey, I'm going to do some consulting work while I figure out my next steps. In under 48 hours after that post, I signed a $3,000 contract per month with a consulting gig. It was for a supplement company who's still a client today, 6.5 years later, which is awesome because I was just a solopreneur when I made that post. And today, 6.5 years later, I have 550 employees. I'm running the largest Amazon agency in the world, at least from an independently owned standpoint, if nothing else. But suffice it to say, I have a lot of opinions on entrepreneurship.
It's also interesting how your biggest successes came from kind of like biggest failures, or at least failures.
Yes. Or moments of uncomfort. Maybe I'll fail, maybe I'll crash land, but can't be any worse off than putting around and sitting around here. I just got back from Colombia. I was doing a hike to the Lost City. And for those of you who are listening to this that like really tough adventures, let me tell you, this was one of them. Going uphill for hours on end. Just think about like just walking up your steps nonstop for hours. That's what it was like on some of these mountain paths in the middle of Colombia, which is on the north side of South America. And it was a jungle. The mosquitoes were biting. The heat was bad. The humidity was so bad that I'm telling you that like there is no such thing as being dry in the jungles of Colombia. There is only levels of dampness. Very, very difficult. And it was a blast. I love that shit. And I love hiring other people who love tough things and just want to level up and want to go on an adventure and want to bring prosperity to the world. And so that's what I've built my systems around. And you're right. Like, I'm driven by leveling up through adversity.
When we go back to your beginning, after you stopped being a reporter, why do you think were you so successful in this phase?
Between being a reporter and like my 10 years on the corporate track, first of all, television reporters make nothing. Like you're living in poverty. So let's establish that first, right? It's a very high skill job with very low pay, right? Like the garbage man was making more money than me as a television reporter, right? So let's establish that first. The second thing is that because it's high skill, I could go do anything. I was interviewing people. I knew how to ask tough questions. I knew how to tell stories in a very short time window. And so I learned a lot about everything. It's a great job for somebody who is generally just got high interest in everything. So I had that ability very early on in my career. But I will tell you this, while I was there, I would talk to managers all the time and be like, what can I do to advance my career? You know, what would you recommend? And one director took pity on me, put me under his wing and said, double some metrics. You figure out a metric that you can double and go double it. And I picked retention, reactivation of some old leads. I basically learned and self-taught myself sales as an enrollment counselor. And I figured out a process and I figured out how to double the success rate of old leads. Then I made it a systematized process and gave it to other people who could replicate and achieve the same rates. So I took that to management. I'm like, look what I did, promote me. And they're like, no. And I'm like, why not? Look at the numbers. And they're like, because you're too aggressive. And I'm like, then I'm out of here. Right. And, you know, I started applying to other jobs. And so I applied to a sister company called Straighterline, which was selling college courses for $99 a month. And I said, look at these metrics. Aren't they cool? Want me to do that for you too? And they're like, yes, we would. And they hired me on the spot. So I flew and moved across the country, met my wife in Maryland, popped out 5 kids. I run my business like I run my family. Hashtag never pull out. Always trying to go as hard and as fast as possible. Just a lot of interesting opportunities. Every single failed startup led me to referrals, led me to other opportunities. I side hustle consulted for 6 years of the 10 years on the corporate track before I went out on my own. And so the day that I had to go out on my own, I knew exactly what I was doing. I had a plan. However, it took me a long time to burn my ships. It wasn't until, 6 months after starting my agency that even though I had hired employees, I had 3 employees, like I was successful, I was making $43,000 a month in revenue, very fast growth. And it wasn't until I looked at the bank account, I'm like, man, I'm making more money than I was 6 months ago. Maybe I should burn my ships and go all in on this and stop applying to full-time jobs. That's how long it took me to burn my ships because I didn't want to start an agency. They're so hard. It's harder than being a television reporter. So I didn't want to do it, but I was really good at it. And then I decided, you know what? I'll just hire people to do all the things I don't like to do. There's a bunch of business books I can reference, like Who, Not How. And, I built an extreme ownership sort of caliber level of talent. I set up some core values. I made sure we had radical candor. I basically built an HR model with an education type esque. It was growing faster than I could keep up with. We hired 100 interns, but it didn't take us 30 days. We did it in 23 days. And I'm here to tell you that doubled the size of my company in less than 30 days. I had 100 employees. I hired 100 interns. I went to 200. It was insanity. Nobody had done this before. I've never read a business book where this was done. Never saw a social media post about this being done. But I'm here to tell you it was perfectly maneuvered. And many of those interns are now leaders today, at my company. And so I figured out how to write SOPs. I figured out how to dumb down every role to make it as tactical as possible so we could just hire somebody, make them a master at it, and then build an entire system around it. I love what I do. Can you tell?
Why do you think was nothing happening in the beginning when you asked them for this huge goal?
For me to get 100 interns hired in 23 days to change the entire methodology of my entire recruitment process is significant. Oftentimes, as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, I find myself repeating myself because that's what it takes. And so you have to take painstaking time to go translate it piece by piece, piecemealing it slowly. And by default, everybody put their shoulder to the wheel and pushed along and had to figure it out. That's what leadership is often the case, is the severe positioning to make sure that everybody is hyper-focused on that one thing.
Do you think they wouldn't have started and you wouldn't have achieved hiring 100 interns so quickly when you didn't threaten them to get fired?
Yes. I probably would have got 5 interns or 6, right? The whole playbook, the whole criteria had to change. They had to change their entire process. And so, yes, I am very confident if I didn't call all 3 of those meetings that something wouldn't have changed. What's actually really interesting in looking back is that it only took 3 meetings. At most companies, it would have taken a lot longer to do what I tried to do that we accomplished in 23 days. We were ahead of schedule. And it was a very grandiose vision. It doubled the size of the company. It was very difficult. Can you imagine, like, hey, by the way, these 100 new bodies, they need to know where to go, what to do. Everybody was running around with their heads cut off, but it was magnificent. And it was effective. And within 60 days, we had trained all these people and we were deploying these people and they were happy and we were happy. And for the ones that weren't happy, they weren't here anymore. That's fine. Sometimes it's about getting the right people onto the bus and getting the wrong people off the bus. And then when they're on the bus, you got to shuffle seats to get them into the right seats, which is also in some other business books, a la traction or a la scaling up. And a lot of these things that I've done in my career is I'll go do something and then I'll read a business book a year or 2 later. And I'm like, I freaking did that. I'm like, yo, where was this book when I needed this a year ago? So I try and read 2 business books every single week. I actually just ran out of business books, but I saw one yesterday on LinkedIn about how cold calling sucks. So I just bought that one and added that to my list. And cold calling does suck. Oh my gosh, it's difficult. But an entrepreneur has to be good at sales. Otherwise, their entire business model is dead. Like, you could be the best customer service rep ever. You could be awesome at ops, but if you can't sell anything, you're never going to be a great entrepreneur. You have to have high drive. You got to be an introvert who has no care about what people think about you. You got to be impatient. You got to be intense. And you got to be detail oriented, because if you're not detail oriented, you can't build a system. Like, that's, in my opinion, like the perfect entrepreneur is an architect who has all of those traits. And I do have all those traits. And I have found a lot of success because of those traits.
Do you think people can be trained to be good salespeople and all of those characteristics that you mentioned for to be a good entrepreneur? Or do you think there are certain type of people who are made for being entrepreneur and you have to like they still have to train, but only those people should start a business and succeed and have good chances of succeeding?
Any behavior can be faked. I could do the complete opposite of everything I just said on this conversation, and I could fake it for a time. But to have true scalable success in the fashion we've described, I believe those traits are mandatory. Now, if you have 80% of those traits, could you be successful? Absolutely. But you're going to have to hire around that other 20%, right? You're going to keep around the idiots that shouldn't be there. And you're going to, and the team is going to be angry about it. You're going to lose good talent because you kept bad talent. You're a softie. A low drive person wouldn't care about money enough and probably wouldn't be focused on margins and profits. And they wouldn't be looking ahead into the future. Somebody that's patient would, not make enough decisions, would just sit on their laurels, right? Somebody that's more big picture, they might do really good at sales, but they can't build systems. You have to be detailed to build systems because you have to know how to go into the weeds and speak to the person who actually has to be the end user. You got to be like, hey, I need you to do step A, then B, then C, followed by D, E, and F in that order. And here's what they look like. And here's examples and here's pictures. A big picture person has a very difficult time describing steps 3 through 7. They'll be like, yeah, step 1, 2, 10. And everybody around them is like, what are you talking about? How do I go from step 3 to 7? They can't describe it, right? Because their head is so far up in the clouds. 80% of that, if you possess 80% of the opposite of what I just described, what I initially described, then you'll probably be okay. But if you possess 100% of it, you best believe you should be an entrepreneur, right? Like, stop that corporate job as soon as possible, because if the things that I'm talking about resonate, you're going to be a fantastic entrepreneur. Now, if you possess 80% of that, you'll probably succeed. Let's say you're an enterpriser with high drive, introversion, impatience, but you're a big picture thinker. You can't build systems to save your life, but you could go copy somebody else's systems and maybe do a really boring business and just replicate it. You'd be really good at that. You see how that 80% can still get you there. But an entrepreneur building out something brand new wouldn't be able to do that without that detail orientation.
Why did you hire interns, not
Because
real
that's a
employees,
great
full-time
question.
employees?
I hired interns who were basically glorified, low-paid full-time employees because I couldn't find enough talent. So in my space, in the Amazon selling space, I believe that we're short about 50,000 people. That was reason one. We were just short on talent. So I had to go create talent. The second problem is that a lot of my competitors were hiring people that I just didn't think were a good fit for my system. They were hiring emotional extroverts galore. I don't know what it is about agency land, but agency land really attracts emotional extroverts. And when we say emotional extrovert, I mean divas. I mean people that are really into themselves with high opinions of themselves, high ego diva type style people. They may have watched some Netflix show about what it's like to work in an agency, and you're like, yeah, I feel important, and I want to go do that. I don't know what it is, but I've just seen like so many emotional extroverts in the space. So I'm over here as the logical introvert, all brain, no heart, looking at the guy who's making all heart, no brain decisions and wondering how we are still alive. So I went out and hired a bunch of logical introverts. Now, here's the thing that most people don't realize. Logical introverts interview poorly. Like they are just not great interviews. You have to change how you interview to find this talent pool because the extroverts crush interviews. They're so likable. They'll tell you everything you want to hear. The logical introvert will be like, no, I don't know how to do that. And it's like a core thing to the job. And you're like, what do you mean? You don't know how to do this? And you're like, no, but I think I could learn. That's what an introvert would say, right? The extrovert's like, yeah, I could do that. No problem. Just lie to your face. But an introvert doesn't do that, right? They don't care what you think about them, to some extent. So I went out and hired a very different talent pool, and I had a little immense amount of success because of it. It was much easier to run my company because I literally use personality profiling tools like Culture Index to figure out like, hey, no emotional extroverts allowed, no blamers. We are only hiring learners, and it's okay to hire a logical extrovert, but no emotional extroverts. Like, just can't do it. And I make decisions to hire people on paper well before I even talk to them. And usually, like, my interviews are just to verify that, yeah, this is the right guy. But a lot of times people interview to like figure out, like, no, do I like him? Do I not? No, I know I like you if I interview you. I just use the interview to verify that, yep, you're the right pick.
How do you choose the right people, especially on paper?
Sometimes you got to create a new role or a new department that you've never done before. But for old departments and old jobs, you should have that super prioritized, like your SLA, your job offers, your description of what the person does should have like 20 SOPs. It should be highly detailed. You should know exactly who you're looking for. Somebody listening to this is going to be like, oh, this is absurd. You can't use personalities to decide who's going to do better where. And there's exceptions to every rule, and they would be right 7% of the time. But 93% of the time, I am 100% right. And I've seen so much data on this. I've had over 100,000 people apply to my company and take a 2-question survey. I have all of the data that I possibly could need. So I'm very confident. I keep a framework that I do not violate, and I hold it dear to my heart.
Would you give an example or two of those questions you ask to distinguish the right people?
The question that is asked in the survey is just simply, here's a bunch of words in front of you. Select which words describe you. It's as basic as that. Now, during an interview process, I do take that one layer deeper instead of, okay, I understand your culture already because I have the survey, but what I don't know is your ethos. I don't know what makes you tick. So tell me, what's the largest mistake that you've ever made working at a company? The largest financial impact. I ask that of high drive people all the time. What happened? And what I'm listening for is, are they a learner or are they a blamer? So those are the sort of questions that I would ask.
How important is their experience in exactly doing the same things that you are looking for? Or is it more important about the character?
Character and culture all day long. And that works for me because I'm an educator, right? I'm an education system. I built an education company that happens to be an agency. Now, a lot of other companies cannot replicate my process. They cannot become educators. They don't have 2,000 videos on YouTube. Like my Amazon guys, search volume for my brand is very good because of all of the content that we've put out. We have people that do the job. They're an Amazon specialist at another agency by following the My Amazon Guy SOPs. So sometimes people will apply to us just because they've already used our process and they love it so much and their current company doesn't provide one. So my process is not replicatable by everybody. In fact, most companies can't replicate it, which is, good for me. It makes me an inch wide and a mile deep, and I like that. But for other companies, they have to hire talent who already have done the job before because they don't know how to teach. They don't have SOPs. They don't have a training process. They don't even have a trainer, for crying out loud. Those companies will pay a premium for people who have gone down that path and have done the job for 2 years. There's nothing wrong with that. It just means that instead of paying for a trainer and building out SOPs, you're going to have to pay for talent. that already know how to do the job. The other problem to that is if there's not enough talent in your space, the premium keeps going up. By hiring interns, I'm paying bottom dollar. I can train, I can build in a group of 10 people at a time, typically. And then of that 10 people, I know that 3 will become managers. I know that 3 will be good and 3 will not be good. And then a 1's a wild card. And that math checks out indefinitely. And for the cost of 1 qualified full-time hire in the United States, I can hire 5 interns in the Philippines, maybe even 6. And then I have way more hands on deck to do things. The nice thing about hiring in the Philippines is they are really detailed over there. They're also more American than most Americans. Like I go down to the Philippines and they're singing American karaoke and they know more songs than I do, right? So there's a lot of great things about the Filipino culture and things that I've learned as I've done my international travels. And I don't have a physical building. I could hire anybody anywhere.
How do you keep them motivated, especially when they're working remotely?
Learning. The nice thing about hiring learners is they love to learn. And since I'm an education company, what do they like to do? They love to learn. They join MAG because they like to learn, and they stay at MAG because they like to learn. So knowing what culture you want to build as an entrepreneur, and then making a framework, and then sticking to that framework, and then never deviating is a key or a fundamental key to scaling as an entrepreneur.
How do you make sure the wrong people go away?
Fire them. Simple as that, right? Like you obviously can be soft on the people and tough on the issues in a good way. We have certain things. If you steal from the company, you steal time, or we're going to fire you on the spot. Like that's in the employee handbook. There are other things like making mistakes. Like we'll give a warning, we'll give them a PIP, performance improvement plan, give them a chance to fix themselves. We'll do all of those things like a normal company does. But the difference is that in the PIP, it will say if you don't correct these behaviors, your job can be terminated. And then we terminate it. And the nice thing about the process and the framework is that not very many wrong people get in, but when they do, we feel it because it's so glaring. It's like looking at the black sheep and we're like, oh man, this is a black sheep. This is probably not a good fit. You're not going to like this anyway.
How did the environment on Amazon changed over the years?
So it's getting harder every year. Competition's going up. My company, we grew to 20 million ARR. I'm static for the first time in 6.5 years. Buyer sentiment, sellers are, a little put out. Economy's a little soft. So those are some of the things that we're seeing change. Amazon increases the rules every year. So it gets harder and harder. 10 years ago, I could buy position 1 in PPC, get an ad at the top of Amazon for 2 cents a click. Today, some categories I'm paying $6 a click. So we're seeing a lot of money movement, a lot of changes to just the gold rush. It's still great to sell on Amazon, but it's not passive income. And so whenever I'm talking to Amazon sellers, they're a little bit more skeptical. The gold rush is over. The VC money's dried up. It's very easy to obtain a 15% net margin while selling on Amazon. And that's classic in almost every business sector ever. It's a great opportunity if you know what you're doing. And if you don't, I hope they hire me along the way. And that's where I hang my hat. I share all my trade secrets, and some people will use them and never talk to me, but other people will use them and be like, this is too hard. I'm going to hire to pay you to do it for me. And that's my entire business model in a nutshell.
You said you are reading regular books. Are you deep into like Amazon algorithm and trying new different things, or is it what your team is discovering how to optimize certain things and you are sharing that with other people? How does it work?
So I believe that I'm the industry leader on Amazon SEO, and I talk a lot about all of the algorithm updates and changes. For example, I think click-through rate is more important than it's ever been before. Hardly anybody was talking about CTR a year or two ago. Now everybody is, and I basically led the industry charge on that. And there's various updates but my entire SEO plan is published. Like anybody can replicate it. 6-7 years ago, I was telling everybody they need to put copy in their alt text of their photos. And everybody's like, A+ content doesn't index. And I'd be like, yes, it does. Just prove, scientific method. Here's my hypothesis. You go replicate it. Here's what you do. You put 100 characters of alt text behind each photo. You add 500 words of copy to your A+ content. And I pretty much guarantee your SEO juice, your indexing will go up 25%. And it does. So things like that over time we've established, and I follow it. I see, AI is going to replace Google 100%. Hopefully AI is not censorship AI, and because Google is 100% censorship and ChatGPT is censorship. I'm hopeful to see some of these things, the algorithms changing, but I'll give you one tip that I learned just this last couple months. Buying backlinks for websites still a thing. Right. I bought 500 backlinks for the term Amazon agency, and I went from position 6 to position 2. I didn't do anything else. I just bought 500 backlinks. Anybody that tells you backlinks don't work, they're wrong. It still does. All of the classic SEO things that you've heard probably over the last decade still work, just to varying different degrees.
Yeah, we sell guest posts and backlinks. So for us, it's clear
Well,
that it
there you
works.
go. Hire Will, because it still works, guys. I believe, like, I'm literally proof of it.
So I guess you test all the time.
I test everything. And the nice thing about Amazon is we get really fast data, just lickety split fast data. Sometimes on websites, you have to wait a little bit longer. You don't have enough traffic, but on Amazon, that's not the case. You'll know immediately. There's almost anything you can do on Amazon, you'll know in 7 days.
Yeah, with Google, it's much more difficult. You see the results sometimes 6, 9, 12 months later.
Yes. One of the other things that's very unique about Amazon is you need sales to get sales. It's a very weird statement, but the more sales you get in the Amazon algorithm, the more it rewards you and gives you free rankings. Like Google claims that it uses engagement rates, but I could write like the highest quality content. It doesn't even index or rank. Right? I buy some backlinks, all of a sudden to the top of Google. So like their whole system is corrupted and nonsensical in many ways. But on Amazon, if you get sales, you'll get more sales. It's like a guaranteed equation. X plus X equals Y. Like, yeah, weird formula, but very solvent, right? Like the more you put into X, the other X gets bigger, and then Y gets bigger. It's just crazy. It's interesting to see. So there's a thing called the honeymoon period on Amazon. So in the first 3 months, the faster you sell, the more sales you'll generate, the more rankings you'll leapfrog over the competitors. Reviews are they're not worth as much as they used to be. Amazon's A/B testing whether they even show reviews in the search results. Brand names, Amazon's basically a brand killer. Oftentimes I'll go around and I'll ask people, what was the last thing you bought on Amazon? And they'll be like, I bought soap. And I'm like, cool, what was the name of the brand? And they'll be like, I don't know. Right. And that's because Amazon's killed the brand names. It's very much a commodity marketplace, which means you have to spend a lot of time focused on that main image to improve click-through rate and to make sure you have all the traffic generating strategies in place.
It sounds like it's a bit tough to start on Amazon, but then when you achieve a certain level, then it's easier.
It's a momentum thing, right? The more momentum you have, if you're in a bobsled, you're going down the hill. Sometimes it's really hard to get the bobsled to the top of the hill, but once you start going down, it just goes really fast, 100%.
What could you tell me about which kind of clients you try to avoid and not to accept?
So I hate clients that don't want to pay me money, first of all. Like I fire those ones super fast. But clients that are high burn, right? Like you see the meme posted on social media all the time. It's like a paragraph long about a $500 client. And they're like, as we prepare to go on this mission together, I just want to make sure we're aligned and yada, yada, yada. Then you see the $5,000 client, wire sent, thanks. So there is a thing about larger clients being better clients. It's 100% true. The brand new entrepreneur that's hiring an agency for the first time is a way more difficult client. And that's okay, right? I do cater to that ICP, by the way. I help new sellers all the time. But at the same time, if you gave me a choice between working with a brand new seller who's not sold anything and working with somebody who's sold 1,000 units, if somebody listening to this is trying to figure out like how to build their business or their entrepreneurship, if you're doing an agency thing, go upstream as fast as you can, because the faster you do, the happier you'll be. Just like Alex Ramosi talks about all the time, go solve rich people problems if you want to be rich. Just point blank, like there's like that checks out. Like if you came to my house and be like, Steven, I'll mow your lawn so you don't have to. I'm more likely to pay you more because my lawn's big, right? Like I got 17 acres of land because I've been a successful entrepreneur. I'm a rich guy. If you come solve my problem, you're more likely to make more money per hour.
How did your attitude towards this point change compared to your starting time?
I would say I'm probably more jaded today than I was 7 years ago. I probably have been more taken advantage of. I have probably seen more employees let me down. I've seen more stereotypes play out, things I can't say without being canceled, on the air. Right. I've seen it all. Right. So I'm very much a more jaded person. That doesn't make me a bad person. It's just you asked me how my attitude's changed. And it was the first thing I thought of. Right. Like I'm probably more cemented in my belief set today than I was 7 years ago. Like I really feel like I figured out life. I really know what I want. And I really know how people are going to behave, and I can predict them. If you ask the younger Stephen Pope, I may not be able to answer that question. In fact, I was probably a very confused young man growing up, wondering why people were doing what they were doing. I didn't understand their behavior. You can call this autism, you can call this whatever, naivety, but like I thought everybody was like programmed the same way as me. It took me decades to understand that everybody is programmed differently, and you need to treat people differently. Like you hear about the silver, the gold, and the platinum rule, right? Like, the golden rule is treat others how you want to be treated. That actually doesn't work very well, by the way. Right? It doesn't. The platinum rule is treat others how they want to be treated. Right. And once I understood the platinum rule, my life got a lot easier. I was just like, oh my gosh, when I need something from an extrovert, I don't send them a text message. Right. Like I call them. Right. Like way more effective to call an extrovert if you want to get something. If I want something out of a high drive person, I don't ask nicely. I just tell them I'll horse trade. I'll be like, I'll pay you money to do this. And they'll be like, hell yes, I'll do it. Right? If I want to get something out of a high detailed person, I got to tell them, here's what I expect from you. And, I understand that it's very important for you to deliver something of high caliber, but here's what done looks like. Right. So understanding all of these different things, understanding that I can't send 17 Slack messages in an hour to a high patient person because it will reset them for 4 hours. Right. These are things that I've only mastered in the last 3 years. I've grown up a lot.
Do you also recognize the character of your clients and act according to that?
I'll summarize my answer with the framework for you. Never do your best work for your worst clients. Everybody knows what their best clients are. They're the ones that pay on time, were appreciative, that don't cuss at your employees, that treat you fairly, treat you right. Simply put, if you do your best work for the noisy, squeaky wheels, you're not going to be happy. They're still going to fire you anyway, by the way, and still stiff you. Do your best work for your best clients.
Do you fire clients?
All the time. I've had clients like hit on some of my attractive employees and I fire them. I'm like, that's unacceptable, right? Like, dude, you're 60, you're married, like this is inappropriate. I've fired clients who are abusive. If a client comes to me and says, you guys are effing stupid and idiots, I'll be like, okay, no problem. See you. Bye. There's no coming back from some of those. Agency land is high churn, high burn. Very taxing to work at an agency. It's why it took me 6 months to burn my ships initially when I went down this path, because I knew what I was getting into. I had worked at an agency before. I'd worked at Moxie Interactive out of Atlanta, Georgia, and I knew what I was signing up for. The only client that Moxie Interactive had me work on was Verizon Wireless. I was able to take their mobile app from 2.5 stars to 3.7. Still bad, but not as bad, right? From a review standpoint. And so like when you get into the leadership calls with Verizon, right? Like they tell you to your face, make our customers hate us less. That's such a weird brand position to hold as a leadership of Verizon Wireless. But I heard that some weird stuff. But yeah, so I've been around the block, and you can't see my gray hairs, but they're there. I've lost my hair from working at an agency. If you look at even my videos and contents from 5-6 years ago, way different hair game back then. And I've since in the last 6 months, I've discovered TRT, testosterone treatment, very open about this. If you're a guy listening to this, you're on your testosterone treatment plan. You're not alone, dude. Like I'm telling you, almost all the men I know are on it. And it just big game changer. Men don't have enough testosterone in the world today. So those are all the random things that go float through my head and experiences that I've had, Will, and you've done a good job in pulling them out of me today.
Do you have any advice as last words for entrepreneurs in the beginning of their stage?
Become a hummingbird and take action immediately. So go be an entrepreneur, but do it today. Like if you listen to this and then don't take any action today, then what the heck? You just wasted an hour. Like go find the inspiration, that one thing I said today that makes you want to go do something, then fricking go do it. Today, not tomorrow, but today.